So I'd like to start my remarks by doing a quick little exercise, and feel free to participate or opt out. Please raise your hand if you are strong, either physically or in terms of your character. Who's strong? Okay. Please raise your hand if you see yourself as a leader. Please raise your hand if vulnerability makes you uncomfortable. Raise your hand if you like to watch sports. Raise your hand if you feel protective toward people who are in danger. And now please raise your hand if you are a nurturing person. Raise your hands if you enjoy cooking or doing crafts. Raise your hands if you like to make your surroundings comfortable and beautiful. Raise your hand if you've ever been called soft-hearted. Raise your hand if you like to go shopping. Okay. Now, as you probably figured out, the first 5 questions identify things that are stereotypically male, and the second 5 things that are stereotypically female. Did anyone raise their hands for all 5 of the questions associated with your assigned gender? How about none of the other 5? Right? So I wanted to start here because it makes it so clear that for the vast majority of us, the roles assigned to us by the gender binary are just not a perfect fit. That's because they're a cultural construct that try to force unique and complex human beings into rigid and narrow categories. It would be like trying to sort all of the colors in a box of 128 crayons into 2 boxes, one labeled black and the other labeled white. Only there's more than 128 colors of people. There's 8 billion. So why would humans choose to categorize rather than celebrating diversity? Honestly, it might be because we're not really smart enough to make decisions that take all of the complexity in the world into account. But I worry that it has more to do with greed. See, if we divide people into categories, then we can say that one category is better than the other and should be allowed to accumulate more power, money, and influence. So let me state it, just for the record, it's pretty obvious. The current campaign to persecute and erase trans and non-binary people has nothing to do with bathrooms or girls' sports. It's about keeping power and wealth concentrated in the hands of rich, white, straight men. Period. Thanks. Now, earlier this fall, I actually had the honor of teaching a class at the University of Idaho on gender and religion. It was fascinating to have an excuse to dig a little deeper into how different cultures and religions treat gender. The 2-sentence version of what I discovered is that in every major faith tradition, there's evidence of support for a belief in the sacredness of all genders. And every major faith tradition has at various points been infected by the patriarchy and weaponized in order to oppress women and queer people. So just as one example, we could take Hinduism. Hindu people tell these beautiful myths around gender-fluid gods. There are stories of gender equality sprinkled throughout their sacred scripture. Hitras, people who transition from one gender to another, are meant to be revered. They are believed to have special powers to bless marriages and children. And yet, in many Hindu countries, for hundreds of years, it wasn't uncommon for widows to throw or be thrown onto their deceased husband's funeral pyre, a practice known as sati, which, thank goodness, is no longer practiced, for the most part, anyway. But what about Christianity? There can be no question that conservative Christians are the driving force behind our country's current trajectory of demonizing and persecuting people who fall outside of rigid gender norms. I know that there are many people in this room who directly or indirectly were deeply harmed by hate and ignorance that cloaked itself as faith. And I want you to hear first and foremost that you didn't deserve that. You are, and always have been, worthy of love, not just love, but reverence. You are a holy being. And if anyone tried to shame you into being someone other than yourself, their behavior was unacceptable, and I would call it evil. Now here's where I'm going to talk theology in the Bible. Because I also want everyone to understand that the weaponized version of Christianity that's being used to persecute queer folk is built on lies. I've preached before on the clobber passages that are used to go after people who fall in love with someone of the same gender. I'd like to lift up just a couple of the passages used to justify violence, both spiritual, societal, and physical, against trans and non-binary people. So let's start with the most common, okay? Male and female, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now, you got to take this verse in context. It's part of a poem, right? Just as the creation of day and night doesn't make dusk or dawn unacceptable or unnatural, and the creation of land and sea doesn't delegitimize coastal wetlands, those words were not meant to force humans into a binary. And lest we forget, according to the text, both male and female were created in God's image. Then there are two passages in Deuteronomy, one about wearing the wrong gender clothing. Like, why does clothing have a gender? That is just so weird. One about wearing the wrong clothing, and one about eunuchs, right? Now, taken in context, these passages have nothing to do with authentic gender identity. They're meant to condemn pagan religious practices. Additionally, there are all kinds of rules in Deuteronomy, if you read through it, from what kind of fabric we're supposed to wear, to whether people should have tattoos, to how we wear our hair, what to eat, what not to eat. Now, when it comes to Deuteronomic rules that they don't want to bother to follow, Christians assert that Jesus satisfied the old covenant and created a new one. So there's not a lot of integrity in pulling out a couple of obscure passages and insisting that these are the rules that must be followed, as opposed to all those other ones. But I think the most interesting fact is that in the Bible, if you get rid of the translations and go back to the original text, God's self, seems to be represented as gender fluid or gender non-conforming. Now, most often, whoever wrote the Bible did use masculine words and pronouns for the deity, most often, but not always. In the second verse of Genesis, for example, and in other places as well, God is referred to as Elohim. Elohim is a feminine noun. God is also described in one spot as a mother giving birth, in another as a mother hen. If you go back to the original text, we see words used for God that are plural, words that are genderless. So to say that God is male and that there are only two genders is to selectively ignore parts of the very text that conservatives assert is inerrant. Now, while it is a statement of faith that we humans are created in God's image, it's actually a statement of fact that humans create God in our image. Across cultures, the sacred stories we tell all anthropomorphize. They give God human characteristics, and this is to try and make God understandable. Now, sometimes people imagine a God that exemplifies the best of us, and sometimes people imagine a God that displays all of the nasty characteristics we want to have normalized and permitted. The relevant question to ask ourselves is, do our imaginings help us be better people, or do they reinforce or justify harmful behaviors? So here in this place, many of us don't find the concept of God meaningful at all, and that is just fine. But those of us who do, we choose a version of God that centers love. We choose a version of God that helps us bend the arc of the universe toward justice. We choose a version of God that makes space for complexity and diversity. Every single beautiful and unique flavor of human that exists on this beautiful and beleaguered planet is holy, is sacred. So if we gender God at all, let's choose a transgender God, a gender fluid God, a God that's big enough and complicated enough to hold space for all the ways people are people. Okay? So be it, and blessed be.